Allen Lund Company, 47 years young and a proud sponsor, wishes OOIDA all the best as you celebrate 50 years.
OOIDA, representing America's truckers since 1973, presents Landline Now with your host, Mark Reddick.
The U.S. DOT has made the truck parking crisis a priority, and the mission extends through every agency. Administrator Shailen Bhatt of the Federal Highway Administration joins the show to talk about his agency's role in addressing the shortage, when the issue first fell on his radar, what he's doing in Wyoming this week, and more. Few things will create anxiety quicker than finding out you're going to be the subject of an IRS audit. But the potential for you to get audited is measured to a great extent by things you can control. We'll get an idea of what the risks are and what you can do to reduce them from Shasta May of MBA Tax and Bookkeeping Service. And finally, a California bill intended to slow efforts to put autonomous trucks without safety drivers on state roadways has swept through the statehouse despite opposition from the governor. Scott Thompson discusses that, plus a zero-emission truck insurance bill with our state legislative expert, Keith Goebel. But first, the news with Scott Thompson.
Thanks, Mark. Our top story today. The Government Accountability Office says improvements need to be made to the National Consumer Complaint Database, the federal system designed to collect and address complaints against trucking companies. In a report mandated by the Infrastructure Law, GAO said the database falls short of its goal. While the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration does review the complaints, GAO found that its guidance isn't clear, namely in that it doesn't define key terms or provide clear instructions for its staff. Also, while some of the complaint data is available to the public, GAO said not all of it is, which isn't consistent with Department of Transportation policy. As a result, GAO said FMCSA may be missing the opportunity to improve transparency and collaboration with industry partners. The report also laid out a host of other issues and made 14 recommendations. They include making all data public, making sure the website is consistently mobile-friendly, and doing more outreach to let people know what the database is and what it's meant for. The price of diesel continues to climb. The Energy Information Administration, in its latest report, said last week's average for a gallon of diesel settled in at $4.63 a gallon, up more than 9 cents from the previous week. That continues a trend that started more than 2 months ago. The last drop in prices on the EIA survey came on July 3rd, when the average was $3.76. Since then, the average has spiked more than 82 cents. EIA said prices jumped in all 10 regions, led by California, where prices went up more than 22 cents, pushing the state's average back over $6 a gallon. This was all last week. The latest numbers from ProMiles.com show the upward trend continuing this week as well. ProMiles had the Tuesday morning average for diesel at $4.53 a gallon, up 8 cents compared to 1 week ago. Just as with the EIA report, the ProMiles one had prices up in all 10 regions Tuesday morning, also led by California, whose average ticked in at $6.19. A bounce back on the load board after a lull earlier in the month. Landline Now's Ashley Blackford has the latest from DAT.
Robert Rouse with DAT said it saw just over a 7% increase in load volume last week, and that load posts have increased 25% in the last month, following last week's 19% week-over-week increase.
When we look at the overall rates, though, national benchmark broker-to-carrier spot rates for reefers and flatbeds dropped just a penny per mile last week, while vans dropped by about 2 cents per mile. When we look at the rate averages over the past 6 weeks, they've been pretty consistent. And this is one of the signs that the market seems to be bottoming out. And we're not seeing a lot of movement. So hopefully seeing over the next couple of weeks, those rates potentially start to pick back up as that fall shipping season really kicks into high gear.
Rouse said pumpkins and apples are popular produce that drivers can expect to see in high volumes in the next few weeks. For Landline Now, I'm Ashley Blackford.
Thanks, Ashley. A group of Nebraska truckers made the trip east to Washington, D.C. last week to protest a bill in the House that would allow overweight trucks. The bill, introduced in May by Representative Dusty Johnson of South Dakota, would establish a voluntary 10-year pilot program for states to increase truck weights on federal interstates up to 91,000 pounds on 6 axles. KETV News reports the Nebraska Teamsters who went to the Capitol last week want lawmakers to vote no. Local Teamsters Union president and former truck driver Kim Quick told KETV it's mostly a safety issue, saying it'll take longer for trucks to come to a stop and will be harder to avoid a crash. The drivers Lawmakers there were joined by Douglas County Sheriff Aaron Hansen, who echoed those concerns. Sheriff Hansen said heavier trucks would mean more traffic fatalities and more traffic injuries, and added that the nation's infrastructure can't bear the extra weight. It's the same song being sung by groups like the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association, which has long warned against allowing heavier trucks on roadways, and the Coalition Against Bigger Trucks, which sent a letter to Congress last week expressing opposition and asking for a no vote as well. The bill, H.R. 3372, was approved during a markup hearing by the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, but hasn't gained much traction since. It currently has 3 co-sponsors. Cross-border carriers who use the Bridge of Americas may need to make alternate plans. U.S. Customs and Border Protection's El Paso office has temporarily suspended cargo processing at the port of entry. The agency says the move will allow officers to help the U.S. Border Patrol process non-citizens who arrive between the ports of entry. For carriers that regularly utilize the port of entry, the agency suggests nearby cargo facilities as alternatives. There is no timetable for when the port will resume regular operations. One of 4 ports of entry in El Paso, the Bridge of Americas connects the U.S. with the Mexican land port of Cordova in Juarez, Chihuahua, Mexico. Toll rates on the New York State Thruway are going up at the start of the year. The New York State Thruway Authority Board of Directors voted Monday to increase toll rates by 5% for Easy Pass customers starting January 1st, followed by another 5% increase in 2027. Officials noted that this is the first system-wide toll increase for Easy Pass users in 14 years. Increases are also in the works for the Governor Mario M. Cuomo Bridge, both for passenger vehicles and commercial vehicles each year through 2027. Tolling officials said the hike is needed to pay for maintenance and improvements on the Thruway. It's harvest season, which means 'tis the season for overweight trucks in Iowa. Governor Kim Reynolds has signed a proclamation that allows vehicles transporting corn, soybeans, hay, straw, fertilizer, manure, and other ag products to be up to 90,000 pounds gross weight without a permit. The relaxed regulations run for 30 days through October 11th. The proclamation applies to loads transported on all highways within Iowa, but not the interstate system. Other restrictions apply as well. The Iowa Corn Growers Association applauded the move in a news release. Association President Jolene Reason said the proclamation is a tremendous help for Iowa's corn farmers. Reason also put the move into context, saying the extended weight allowance means a 500-acre Iowa corn farmer would require 12 fewer truckloads, and a 1,000-acre Iowa corn farmer would require 25 fewer truckloads, which is both a time saver and a fuel saver. A Dewey Pile has extended its reach into West Virginia. The less-than-truckload carrier announced it has opened its first service center in the Mountain State. It's in Charleston. Pile began service in West Virginia late last year, but didn't have a physical presence there until now. The company has been expanding at a rapid pace in recent months. Last year, it opened 3 new LTL service centers throughout Virginia. Pile now has 28 service centers and 18 warehouses located around the Northeast. And finally, the vast majority of truck drivers are satisfied with their job. That's according to a new survey from TruckStop. It polled more than 500 long-haul truckers about their overall health, hoping to gain a better understanding of the challenges they face on the road to eat healthy and stay active. The survey focused on 3 areas in particular: nutrition, physical health, and mental health. For nutrition, 43% said they lack access to healthy food options, with over a third saying their primary method for eating on the road is ordering fast food. For physical health, 52% said they don't have enough time to exercise while away from home. But despite those challenges, 84% of the truck drivers surveyed said they are satisfied with their job right now. That's Landline Now News for today. I'm Scott Thompson.
Thanks, Scott. Next, we'll talk with FHWA Administrator Shailen Bhatt about truck parking. And I'll cover how to avoid an IRS audit with Shasta May of MBA Tax and Bookkeeping Service. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you want more content, go to landline.media to get updated news, information, and archived editions of our show. Once again, that's landline.media.
Firestone tires are for more of everything. More miles for every tire dollar, and more confidence in your fleet. At Firestone, we help fleets save with dependable value. Find your local Firestone dealer today at firestonetire.com/dealer.
Ready to make more money? Use a better load board. For a limited time, get 50% off TruckStop Load Board Pro. Just go to truckstop.com/go and enter promo code READY2023 when you purchase Load Board Pro.
Welcome back to Landline Now. Last week, we spoke with Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg at an event in South Dakota celebrating a truck parking expansion project just outside of Sioux Falls. The Secretary telling us that the truck parking crisis is a top priority for the U.S. DOT, and that mission extends throughout every agency. Case in point, the ribbon being cut on the I-80 winter freight project in Wyoming this week, another truck parking expansion project with the safety of truck drivers at front of mind, and Administrator of the Federal Highway Administration, Shailen Bhatt, will be there. We had a chance to catch up with Administrator Bhatt before he left for the ceremony, and he made it crystal clear that he understands the severity of the crisis and why it's so important to do something about it. Administrator Bhatt, first of all, thanks so much for being on the program. We know your time is valuable.
Well, thank you, and it's an honor to be here.
So we're talking truck parking today. The truck parking crisis, obviously well documented. We talk about it all the time here on this program. I'm sure you hear about it quite a bit as well. I know you were in leadership roles in several state DOTs before coming over to the Federal Highway Administration. So I'm curious when this particular issue, this truck parking shortage, first fell on your radar.
I was the deputy director with the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet, and we had the Brent Spence Bridge that went across the Ohio River. And I think something like 3% of the entire country's GDP would cross that bridge, and all of that was on trucks. You know, when I was in Delaware, I was chair of the I-95 Corridor Coalition, and there was trucks moving up and down the East Coast. And when I was the Colorado DOT director, you know, just right neighbors there with Wyoming, where we're going to be for this project, you know, we would find out when there was a winter storm in Wyoming, both because of the weather impacts and because of all of the road closures that we would need to broadcast out. So I think I've just been aware throughout my entire career. Most people think about transportation from their own personal trips, but I always think about freight, and particularly our truck drivers, as the critical part of that supply chain.
Yeah, and I think it's an issue that more and more people are becoming aware of as we talk about it more and more, and it's kind of getting out there in the mainstream media as well. You know, obviously, truck drivers know what a hassle this can all be, not being able to find a spot, especially when they're out of hours. They also know, obviously, how dangerous it can be as well. Can you talk a little bit about your concerns when it comes to the lack of truck parking nationwide and why it is such an important issue to address?
Yeah, it's an inconvenience for people when there aren't, goods to buy on the shelves. And we've come to expect as Americans, that those goods just magically appear. And I don't think we think about all of the backbreaking and difficult labor that goes into getting them there. And it can be an inconvenience for truckers who can't find a parking spot, but it can also be a life and death issue. And, we often talk about Jason's Law. This is for Jason Rivenberg, who was a trucker from upstate New York who was, had to pull over in a gas station that was out of service in South Carolina, was killed. I mean, it's not about convenience, it's about safety. And that's why this is such a critical issue for the Federal Highway Administration.
It's interesting hearing you talk about it that way, because it's something, and Secretary Buttigieg has talked about this quite a bit and referenced some of the things you mentioned there as well when we recently spoke with him. I know FMCSA Administrator Robin Hutchison has said many of the same things as well. Clearly, this is a priority for the U.S. DOT to address this problem, to make progress on it, and hopefully get some momentum moving forward to where we can actually solve the problem. The Federal Highway Administration, obviously you're in that same family there, but I'm wondering specifically, does your agency have a particular focus when it comes to truck parking? Are you all kind of working in Congress there to make sure that you do get something done? Or, what does your role look like specifically when looking at the shortage out there?
Right. So Secretary Buttigieg is the Secretary of Transportation over all of it. Administrator Hutchison runs the Federal Motor Carriers Administration, which handles the vehicles themselves, the trucks. The Federal Highway Administration, which I run, handles the infrastructure. And so that's why this Wyoming project, which both I think is going to put 200 parking spots, in there for truck parking, as well as adding about 5.5 miles of passing lanes for vehicles and letting freight move more smoothly. We own the infrastructure side of it, and that's our focus. Collectively, though, we're all trying to raise awareness around the importance of freight, because while it's a problem today, freight is only going to grow in this country, particularly as there's more manufacturing taking place here. And so we want to make sure that what is a problem today does not become a crisis in the coming decades.
Yeah, that's interesting. As you mentioned, you've kind of had your eye on this issue for quite a while now, at different levels, state level, federal level, so on and so forth. Do you feel that there has been a shift in recent years in terms of awareness and actually making progress on this? Because I ask truck drivers, and they do feel a bit more optimistic that we're in the right, heading in the right direction now. I'm wondering if you share in that sentiment.
I think the pandemic really drove home for people what it meant to have a supply chain and that goods just don't magically appear by themselves. And while they were all busily and rightfully thanking, frontline healthcare workers, I think there was also a groundswell of appreciation for the incredibly difficult and dangerous job that truckers do in providing all of these goods. And so I just feel like there is, if there's a silver lining to the pandemic, is that there are more Americans who are aware of just what it takes to get these goods to market. And then also, I think there's also a push by the Biden-Harris administration to make sure that both for consumer goods and then also for the critical components that go into manufacturing, that we're reshoring a lot of that so that we can control things like the components of manufacturing, so that we're not both our consumer goods and our manufactured goods are not held hostage by supply chain issues globally.
Yeah, it does feel like we're moving again, in the right direction here. And obviously, you mentioned the things that the USDOT is doing now and the priority that this has become addressing this crisis. For our listeners out there, and when I talk to them, I said there, I asked them, if they feel optimistic about the direction we're headed, and a lot of them do think that we're headed in the right direction, but a lot of them feel helpless too in terms of fixing the problem. It's a huge scale issue right now. Do you have any advice or recommendations for people listening to this, truck drivers out there who do want to get involved and they do want to make some progress on this? What would you recommend that they do?
You always want people to feel a sense of optimism and engagement, and bad things happen in political systems where people feel frustration, right? So, reaching out to your elected representatives. I think the American Trucking Association does a great job of presenting a lot of these issues, because at the end of the day, President Biden represents the executive branch, but the laws get passed in Congress. And so, you want to make sure that congressional representatives are there. But I will say that the bipartisan infrastructure law, and that's a big deal, right? There's not a lot of things in this country that we do easily from a bipartisan standpoint. But, we always say that there's no Republican roads and no Democratic bridges. The transportation system is something that unites all of us as Americans. And so I think that there is bipartisan support, Republicans and Democrats in Congress who say, hey, we can come together and do great things. And I think this project in Wyoming and the project in South Dakota and all of the truck parking that is being built across the country is a reflection of our ability to still build things as Americans.
Yeah, and just to underline that point too, the Truck Parking Safety Improvement Act in the House and the Senate, bipartisan, certainly an example of what you're talking about there for people to reach out and encourage their lawmakers to get on board with that and push that issue forward as well. Because, as you know, this issue needs all the help that it can get. You mentioned Wyoming there, and I do want to spend some time, just a little bit of time here, talking about the I-80 Winter Freight Project. You'll be up there, I think, for the ribbon-cutting ceremony this week. Just talk about what you're looking forward to up there.
Yeah, it's always nice to get back out west. I loved my time on Colorado, and we get up to Wyoming on a regular basis. I'm also critically aware of just how important I-80 is to our national freight system. And so, I remember getting the calls whenever there'd be a winter storm, and you just see those huge gusts of wind that could just knock over tractor trailers on I-80, and we see the ripple effects that would go through there. So it'll, we do a lot of meetings and talking when I'm in D.C., and it's always great to get out into the country and see where we're building these great projects. That's what I'm looking forward to. Absolutely. And 200 truck parking spaces there, opening up a great project there.
As we close things out with you here, Administrator Bhatt, I just want to thank you for being on the program. I know your time is valuable, but as we go here, any closing thoughts for our listeners?
Yeah, I would say that to all the truck drivers who are out there, doing just all of the hard work and the great work that when we think about, what it means to be American, that is an integral part that is woven in there. Just I want to thank them for all of their hard work, and to anybody who's listening who's not a truck driver, when you see one, get out of their way. Make sure you pull over and give them space if you're passing them and they're pulled over on the side of the road, because safety is our number one priority. And just like we want every passenger vehicle to get to their destination safely, we want all our truck drivers to get home to their families as well.
Well put. Administrator Bhatt, thank you so much. We really do appreciate it.
Thank you.
Our thanks once again to Shailen Bhatt, Administrator of the Federal Highway Administration, for his time. Want to spend a little time here following up on that event in Wyoming this week, the I-80 Winter Freight Project. It's adding 200 truck parking spots along Interstate 80 outside of Laramie, a notorious stretch of highway during the winter months for all the wrong reasons. We recently spoke with Andrea Staley of the Wyoming DOT, who said the project is a long time coming, and it came after listening to the concerns of truck drivers.
Well, the Winter Freight Project actually started as sort of a safety project for our commercial drivers on Interstate 80. As many know, driving on I-80 in the wintertime in Wyoming can be pretty treacherous. We just wanted to address some concerns that we've heard from our truckers about appropriate truck parking spaces. But then also we added some climbing lanes to help traffic flow on I-80. It is essentially a mountain pass, so you do get steep grades. So we just wanted to make sure that it was safe for our commuters and also our commercial drivers. And we've been able to successfully provide more truck parking, nearly 200 spaces, one at Quealy Dome, which is going to be at mile marker 290, just west of Laramie, and then at our Fort Steele rest area, and that's going to be at mile marker 228, and that's just shy of Sinclair, Wyoming.
I love that you said that you were listening to the concerns of professional truck drivers, and that's what kind of got this whole thing started. That's refreshing to hear. I know there's so many great state DOTs out there, and they are listening to truck drivers and the concerns they have and doing what they can to, address those concerns. In this particular case, can you talk a little bit about what concerns they were relaying to you? Was it specifically about truck parking? And obviously winter is a big aspect of this. How did that all kind of come together and, these concerns? What was expressed to you?
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, I'm not sure if everybody knows, but Wyomingites are pretty hardened to our winters here. We don't have just the, mountain passes that you have to drive through, but we do have, unfortunately, along I-80, a very windy corridor where it just kind of becomes a vacuum. We get 80 to 100 mile per hour winds consistently, unfortunately, in the wintertime. And when snows mixed with that, it drops the visibility to just about zero. So we want to have a safe space for our truckers to be able to pull off when they are encountering that type of weather pattern, so they can wait out the storms, reduce crashes on our interstates, and just keep everybody safe.
Our thanks to Andrea Staley of the Wyoming Department of Transportation for her time, and to the Wyoming DOT as a whole for spearheading this project, which is sure to save lives over the course of the coming years. Time now for a quick break, but don't go anywhere, because we've got more Landline Now on the other side of this break.
For can't miss accuracy, weigh your truck on a CAT scale.
When you weigh on a CAT scale, you get a no excuses guarantee. You can now save time weighing by using your smartphone. Find out more at weightmytruck.com.
Since you started, what you've loved about trucking is the freedom. Heading out on your favorite route, a good driving song, and thinking about truck insurance. Well, maybe not that last one. That's why we're here. At OOIDA, we have a full range of truck insurance products, expert advice, and great customer service, helping you get the right coverage for your operation. Go to OOIDA.com, because your job is to drive. Our job is to help with everything else.
Few things will create anxiety quicker than finding out you're going to be the subject of an IRS audit. You're listening to Landline Now, and I'm your host, Mark Reddy. Welcome back to the program. The potential for you getting audited is measured to a great extent by things you can control. What you put down on your tax forms, your income, deductions, and other information is part of the list of factors the Internal Revenue Service is looking at. Of course, that means you can take actions that reduce your risk. To get an idea of what the risks are and what you can do to reduce them, I called Shasta May of MBA Tax and Bookkeeping Service. Well, let's talk a little bit about reducing audit risk. First of all, what is it that puts you at audit risk? What are some of the things that can happen with you that will alert the IRS or kind of put them on alert and possibly put you into that pile of people that are going to be audited?
Well, if you're having, say, business losses year after year, if you're having some very large expenses, if you have, say, an expense category that, that you've just dumped a lot of expenses into, say, a miscellaneous, and that number is pretty big, the IRS is going to audit to see what is miscellaneous. It's much better to break down all of your different deductions into separate categories. If you happen to have some major, repair on equipment, it may be better to include a little description, maybe the receipt for that, to explain a really large, untypical expense that you've had. Other things that really each tax return is reviewed, and there's just things that give it a red flag. You are at a higher risk if you're preparing the tax return yourself. That's one of the things that does kind of raise a red flag. If you can have a professional tax preparer do that, especially if you're self-employed, that's a big thing. Schedule Cs, that's the profit and loss from business filed when you're self-employed. That is a favorite audit category for the IRS. So if you're self-employed, one of the things you can do to help reduce the audit risk is to have a paid tax preparer do that tax return for you.
One of the things that I had read about, kind of again researching this, was different aspects of your income. If you got some missing income, if you got wild swings in income, are these things that can put you at greater risk for an audit?
It absolutely is. Typically, if there is any unreported income and they catch that, let's say you're reporting all your income, and maybe you didn't get some 1099s from the work you did, and you think, oh yeah, well, maybe you legitimately forgot that you did this work and didn't get a 1099. Well, the IRS, whether you got it or not, I can pretty much guarantee the IRS got it. So don't think just because you didn't receive it, they didn't receive it. You may have forgotten about work that you did, and it's not included in the return, and they are going to catch that. So you really have to be really good about keeping track of all the income, because it's got to be a match when you file that tax return. If it is not a match, there's going to be an issue.
What about errors? What type of errors? Because, people do make errors. It's just part of being human. But what types of errors are likely to cause you to get a higher audit risk?
Well, there's just a typical, say, a mathematical error. There may be something that, like we said, that's reported to the IRS, whether that is, maybe there was some gambling winnings, or maybe there was, those types of things where you've left something off and the IRS knows it should be on there. And then, like I said, just the typical mathematical errors that are gonna get you audited.
Okay. Are there other things in there that may cause you to be at audit risk?
I think that there are multiple things that can create an audit. One of the big things is the income. The other is, if they are looking at your return and they feel like under your business expenses, they feel like there are personal expenses. You are not allowed to write off personal expenses under your business. And if anything catches their eye, they will audit to see if that is an issue. If you have workers, and you are writing off their wages, and maybe you've misclassified them as an independent contractor, they may question that to see if these independent contractors may in reality be legally employees. So there's a lot of things that can, get you a red flag on a tax return. And you really, if the worst happens and you are audited, you have really got to be aware of what is on that tax return, what has put you at risk. And when they send you an audit notice, they will list what it is that they're questioning on that tax return. So that kind of gives you the ability to, find that backup, that substantiation to prove that what you've listed on there is correct.
I want to ask about one other audit risk, Shasta, and this is one that used to be, I know it was kind of notorious, but I don't know if it is anymore, and that is home office deductions. I mean, we've talked about that in some of our previous conversations, but is that still something that can get you more likely to be audited?
It is. It absolutely is. And it's something that we tell our clients, this is going to be looked at. So try, don't, if you have a home office and it is, say, a bedroom, like in your home, and you have a guest bed in there, that area of where the guest bed is taking up is not part of the office. You have to deduct that square footage out of that office space. You can't take that whole room. You can only take the part of the room, the square footage of the room that is all office and only office, whether that's just a desk and a file cabinet. You don't get to take, the pull-out bed, the pool table, your pinball machine, or whatever else may be in that may be in that room. So you really want to be conservative with that deduction. You absolutely have the right to take that deduction. Just be conservative with it and make sure that you are not taking an inch more than is legitimate.
Let's talk about ways to reduce your audit risk. I mean, obviously, not doing all the things we talked about there
right.
is one way. But are there other ways to reduce your audit risk?
I think the main thing would be to have a professional tax preparer, because part of our job is to eliminate that risk. When we're doing a tax return and you're sending in, say, your list of expenses, if we feel some of those numbers look larger than normal, we are going to ask you what that number is about. And do you have all the backup substantiation receipts for this, because we feel like this is going to attract attention? Yes, it's a legitimate deduction, but be prepared to be audited, because I sometimes will say to a client, listen, this is a really big number. Do you have all the substantiation? And like, absolutely, I would never lie. And I say, well, let's provide them with a little more detail on this particular thing. Let's separate out this, engine rebuild and put that on as a separate line item so that they can see. Let's not add it in with the rest of your repairs and maintenance, for example. If someone sends me a big miscellaneous category, I will say, hey, let's break this down. Let's break it down into 5 individual categories instead of one miscellaneous category. It's really how you present the information is a really big factor. And like I said, the fact that you're filing as a self-employed person, that really increases the risk. So having a paid preparer is really going to reduce it. Breaking down and being as detailed as possible really helps with that as well.
You mentioned self-employment, and I've always heard that that's a major audit risk, is being self-employed. To what extent does incorporating or treating yourself as an employee of a corporation insulate you from the self-employment problem?
It does to a certain degree, absolutely. But keep in mind, we would never recommend a corporation for someone that we did not feel is going to benefit financially from that, from a tax liability standpoint. You have to be fairly high income for the additional expenses of a corporation to be worthwhile. Corporations have a lot of strict rules that you need to follow. You have to take part of your salary. It has to come through payroll with payroll taxes. You're going to have a corporate tax return that needs to be prepared each year. That is another additional major expense. So there are a lot of things with a corporation, strict bookkeeping requirements. So all of these things typically are going to cost you more money. So just filing a corporation just to avoid audit risk really is not, it's not really a good game plan, in my opinion.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit more about audits here. How are people notified that they're the target of an audit? How does the IRS get that information to them?
They're going to be mailing you an audit notice. And typically when you get an audit notice, you do not want to ignore that. You want to handle that as quickly as possible so that it goes as smoothly as possible for you. And kind of minimizes any, additional impact. You want to review the audit letter carefully. Open that letter right away. Don't let it sit there. Don't just look at it for weeks and finally build up the courage. Open it, see what's in it. There are different, types of audits, and a lot of times it may just be what we call a correspondence audit. And there just may be something on the tax return, a possible error, and you can usually correct that or explain that with some documentation. You send that in, boom, that's done, that's over. It could be an office audit when they want you to come in person. And that's that's more serious. And then they have what they call field audits. That's the most thorough type of audit where they want to come to your place of business and go through your all your financial records. So you want to open that IRS notice right away, determine what kind of audit. They have to tell you what they're looking at, then call your tax preparer so they can help you navigate through that situation and act promptly. And, the more you delay, you don't want to antagonize the IRS, and you don't want to have any kind of suspicious behavior, you want to just address it head on.
Well, Shasta, is there anything else on this topic that people need to be aware of?
I would just say that your best bet is whether you're having an actual audit or trying to avoid an audit, talking with a tax preparer is really going to help you. I would recommend not handling an audit on your own, but if you do have one and you want to handle it on your own, absolutely get advice from your tax preparer first. They can prepare you for what is going to happen, and they can give you kind of some do's and don'ts when you're sitting in front of an IRS auditor.
Excellent. Shasta, thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me on the show.
I've been talking with Shasta May of MBA Tax and Bookkeeping Service about reducing the risk of getting an Internal Revenue Service audit. If you have questions about this or other tax matters, you can contact Shasta May by calling 1-888-407-1669, by email at smay@mbataxhelp.com, or by going to the company's website at mbataxhelp.com. Again, that phone number is 1-888-407-1669, by email at smay@mbataxhelp.com, or by going to the company's website at mbataxhelp.com. We'll have all that information on our website, landlinenow.com. Just click on the photo or headline in the red box, and you'll find all the email addresses, website links, and phone numbers that we mention on the show, plus links to related articles. Landline Now will be back in a moment.
Control your toll costs and eliminate tolling headaches with Prepass Tolls. Prepass Tolls means toll volume discounts. Just one invoice for all tolls and fewer violations. Call 877-878-5970 or go to prepass.com.
Attention all truckers, Dean Michael, the tax doctor here. I want to talk to you about those dreaded tax problems. I know you want to keep on trucking and not even think about them, but let's face it, they're not going away all on their own. You need professional help. I've been helping truckers put their tax problems in the rearview mirror for years. I can help you too. Call me now for a free consultation at 888-557-4020 or go to mytaxhelpmd.com. It's like I always say, keep your eyes on the road, I'll keep mine on the IRS. 888-557-4020.
It's tested and proven. Burn 2.1% less fuel when you balance all wheel ends with Centromatic. Call 800-523-8473 to get the OOIDA discount.
Welcome back to Landline Now. Time now for our weekly state legislative update. Last week, we spent some time in Georgia talking over a couple issues that affect professional truck drivers there. Today, we're going to do the same thing, but on the opposite coast. California state lawmakers have been busy in recent weeks, and Keith Goebel of Landline Magazine tracks their every move at every hour of every waking day. Keith, good to see you.
Yeah, we got the east side covered last week. We're going to do west side.
The west side. There you go. Yeah, that explains why you're wearing, I don't know, shorts and a Bermuda shirt. I have no idea. So anyway, we have talked before actually about California's efforts to make sure that autonomous trucks in the state aren't really truly fully autonomous. And despite some pushback from the governor there, a bill is on the move. Let's start with this bill and what it aims to do.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like very often, and when we're covering California legislation, that it's typically legislation that our listeners can really get behind and have a full appreciation for. But this is one of those. This is one that we've been covering throughout the course of the year and following its way all the way through the statehouse, now headed to the governor. But yeah, the issue that they're looking to address is to slow down efforts to have autonomous trucks on California roadways. Of course, there's the California DMV that's looking into changes to the autonomous trucks ban that they currently have, which obviously could result in how many driverless large vehicles there in the state of California. So anyway, with that background, you've got this legislation that, for the most part, it's not unanimous support, but absolutely you've got bipartisan support for this legislation, again, that would restrict the use of these autonomous large trucks on the state's roadways.
And as you alluded to there, California, not known historically as being the most friendly state toward the truck driving community. But we've got this bill. We're going to talk about another one here in a few minutes. But this one in particular about autonomous trucks does, and it makes sense, it does have the support of trucking groups. And I know you have kind of a collection of what those groups are saying about this bill. And, again, maybe not unanimous support, but a lot of support out there for what they're trying to do with this particular issue.
Yeah, and again, worth pointing out that this bill, again, that's gone to the governor's desk, and it would apply or it would restrict those vehicles in excess of 10,000 pounds, which obviously is going to cover the folks who are probably listening to us today. But yeah, concern about the bill is from bill sponsors, advocates there. That the Assembly Speaker there in California pointing out that this is putting in place these restrictions. It's not a ban. It's slowing the process down. Not rushing forward with this is the concern. It's slowing it down. I mean, it might be 5 or 6 years, and then you will see these vehicles out on California roadways, without human operators behind the wheel. But yeah, one of the things that the bill sponsors pointed out is there's nothing in this legislation that would that prevents the autonomous trucking industry from testing and deploying their autonomous vehicles anywhere in the state. They need to have a human operator behind the wheel.
So we've got the support from the legislature. We've got support from trucking groups. But that said, the future of this issue, this bill in particular, a bit cloudy because the governor there, Governor Gavin Newsom, actually opposes this bill and is probably going to veto it, right? What are we looking at here in terms of where we're headed, I suppose? Yeah,
and I think maybe the last time that we talked about this, it was just fresh off of the governor's administration. The Office of Business and Economic Development had submitted testimony to a committee there expressing their concerns, which is unique for a governor's office, really one way or the other, on a bill, whatever the topic might be. But for them to weigh in during the legislative process, I mean, typically, I know I've covered plenty of legislation through the years, and you'll have an attempt to get some feedback, some insight into what the governor might do on a particular issue if the bill gets to the governor's desk in any state, and it is quite normal to have a governor's office say, well, we're not going to comment on pending legislation. If it gets to the governor's desk, then we'll comment on it. Well, and this is one of those issues, autonomous trucks, that the governor's office did weigh in and provided testimony in opposition to this legislation and voicing their concerns. Specifically, the belief being from the governor's administration is that the legislation, it's an inflexible approach to regulating what they say is a growing industry, which I don't think you can argue that it's a growing industry. But the inflexible approach was the point that they were making. Regardless, like as I pointed out, that this bill had bipartisan support. The bill was temporarily delayed. It was taken back up again there in the Senate and made its way to the Senate floor, where it was approved with only two votes in opposition. Yes, an expected veto. I think that's fair. That the governor will ultimately veto this. So at that point, it is would lawmakers override that veto? This bill has such widespread support in the legislature; it could easily have a veto override. Will lawmakers decide to do that? Oftentimes, the lawmakers in the majority party,
kind of
with the same as the governor, whatever the case might be, they don't like to override their governor's veto. So we will see at this point, but interesting nevertheless.
To be continued on that issue. Let's stay in California but shift to another one, and evidence that lightning does strike twice. We've got another issue that trucking groups are backing, this one dealing with zero-emission trucks, and this one surrounding kind of an interesting angle, insurance implications. Walk us through what we're seeing here.
Yeah, this would require the state, California, their Department of Insurance, to collect data on the availability as well as the affordability of insurance for battery-powered trucks, hydrogen-powered trucks, as well as any other type of zero-emission truck. The state, that Department of Insurance, they would work with Air Resources Board, and they would create an online insurance information resource tool, as it is described in the legislation, so that the public can find information and get insurance options, again, for those battery-powered, hydrogen-powered, and other types of electric zero-emission trucks. But yes, it is an issue that they're concerned about. The ability, I say fairness, just the information that is available for getting insurance for, again, those affected loads.
The idea being that it can be tough, is that right, for zero-emission truck owners to find insurance? Is that kind of the idea?
Absolutely, yeah. That is the issue that they're trying to address. They're trying to essentially empower those affected truck owners to what options are out there so they can get their trucks insured.
Yeah, that makes sense. And as I mentioned there, the California Trucking Association backing this plan as well. So this one also is an issue that has the support of trucking groups like this one.
Yeah. They've California Trucking Association, what they've said, early adopters of this zero-emission trucks, that they have found that insurers are reluctant to underwrite them, and often, just get partial value of the truck. So any effort to expand on or make a little bit more available what options are out there is something that they're backing.
Updates on this one to come as well. Keith, people can check out your coverage on all 50 states at landline.media and in every issue of Landline Magazine. Always a pleasure.
Well, thanks for having me.
And that's our show for today. We thank you for listening and hope you'll join us again tomorrow with another episode of Landline Now. Until we meet again, take care and drive safe out there.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you want more content, go to landline.media to get updated news, information, and archived editions of our show. Once again, that's landline.media.
I'm a dad.
A son.
A husband.
Wife.
I'm a writer.
Photographer.
I farm.
I'm a veteran.
I love old cars, fishing.
My kids.
Chrome.
And I am
a professional truck driver.
And together we are OOIDA.
OOIDA was founded by truckers to stand up and speak on behalf of truckers. We've done that by combining the individual voices of our members into a single, powerful voice. Protecting your interests, defending your rights.
Join us! Make your voice heard. Join OOIDA, the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association. Call 1-800-444-5791 or visit ooida.com.